Okay, so thank you, Martin. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation and for putting together such an interesting workshop. So before I start, I should say that the results that I will present are joint work with Caterina Nick from KAUST, Ulisse Stefanelli, and Giuseppe Tomassetti. So the work that I'm going to talk about fits within the general umbrella of morphoelasticity. So what does it mean? That somehow we are going to describe some phenomena which involve both growth and elastic deformations. There are, of course, many examples of morphoelasticity. It's something that is very much ubiquitous. So you can find biological examples, such as, let's say, cell proliferation, but also non-biological and even technological examples, let's say, epitaxial growth, crystallization, and modeling, let's say, of surfactants. The kind of phenomenon that we want to focus on today is a very special kind of growth, meaning that we want to focus on accretive growth. What does it mean? That we're going to assume our body grows by adding mass to its boundary. And the kind of prototypical example that we can all have in mind is the one of a seashell. So you start from something very little, it keeps adding mass to its boundary, it grows. And this example is also good to keep another feature of this process in mind, namely the fact that we have different time scales coming into play. Growth is a very slow process. It could take years, even decades. Elasticity, so the way in which our body reaches its elastic equilibrium, is very, very fast. Starting from this observation, it's kind of natural to think, to describe our body in its actual configuration in a quasistatic equilibrium. So we are going to assume that the mechanical quantity describing our body is going to be its displacement. We will keep track of its linearized strain, and we will assume that the divergence of the stress is equal to some elastic forces, and that the linear elastic response is going to be given by the usual elastic stress and another contribution, which is due to the presence of a given back strain. This back strain somehow keeps track of the fact that our material is growing. And so by growing, it induces a certain mechanical effect, which affects also the way in which the material behaves elastically. Now, how can we describe that? Well, the starting point for our analysis was a model by Lev Truskinowski and Giuseppe Zurlo from 2018. And basically, the main idea is the following, that how can you describe the evolving reference configuration, first of all? Well, the idea is that you fix a point here, somewhere outside, let's say, your original domain, omega 0, and then what you do is to wait until this point is added to your configuration. And how do you keep track of that? Well, it's through this map theta, which is called the time of addition map, which basically does the following. So for a given point x, theta of x tells you when the point x is added to the evolving growing configuration. And then the other way in which this growth affects the model is, as I said, through the back strain. And following the model described there, we assume this back strain to be given by the elastic strain evaluated in x and at time theta x, namely at the time in which my point x is added to this evolving configuration. So to summarize, the kind of problem that we want to solve is the following. We have an evolving reference configuration in terms of this function theta. On the actual set omega t, I have my elastic equilibrium system. And then I also have to add some condition that allows to, let's say, filter out rigid movements. And in this case, we consider a kind of a docking condition, assuming that our displacement has to be equal to 0 on a given set omega, which is within our original configuration. Now, how do we start studying such a problem? Well, let's assume, to simplify the situation, that our grow law is already given, is prescribed. Okay? Then what can we prove? Well, I put here a meta theorem, meaning that is not really precise. But what we could prove with my co-authors was the following, that assuming you already know how your set grows, and assuming that this growth is such that the Korn inequality holds, and I will specify what this means later on, then you can find a unique elastic displacement, which is h1 at each time t on your actual configuration, and that solves the elastic equilibrium system. Now, the 2 points in red in these slides are the important ones. Why so? Well, let me start from the one below here. First of all, I have this back strain, which is basically kind of a trace of my linearized elastic strain in x theta of x. If I didn't have this k for a moment, to write this down, I would need a given regularity for my linearized elastic strain, a regularity that a priori we will not have. And this is the reason why formulating this pointwise is a little bit hard mathematically. And this is the reason why we kind of relax this assumption a little bit. This operator k that you see there is basically a non-local operator that kind of does a little convolution in time and space of the values of our linearized strain. This is meant in such a way that this thing makes sense even if epsilon of u has a slightly lower regularity. Let me come to the other big red point. So we need basically that the growth law is such that Korn holds for every time t. And actually, not only that. What we actually need is the following. We need to make sure that we have the second Korn inequality so that we can control the L2 norm of the gradient on our set omega t in terms of the L2 norm of its linearized strain in a uniform way, meaning that this constancy should be independent of time. And the question is, how can we achieve that? So what do we need on the growth law so that such an inequality holds? Well, the first remark is that at each time t, we need a very special property for our set omega t. So we need these sets to be John. Okay, what does it mean? So a John domain is something that a priori is very wild. So it's not Lipschitz. It doesn't have the internal ball condition. It doesn't have the internal cone condition. It could have cuts. It could have cusps. But John domains are such that Korn inequality holds, and actually also the converse holds. That if you know that on a given domain Korn inequality holds, then this domain must be John. But as I said, John domains can be very, very wild. Cox snowflakes are John. If you want a precise definition, what is a John domain? So basically, the property is the following. You fix a special point x0, and you have a given constant Cj. And then what you can say is that for every point in your domain, you can fit a slanted cone, okay, in such a way that here in the middle, you have an arc length parametrized curve. And you can always say that the distance of this curve from the boundary of your domain is bigger than a given constant, the John constant, times this parameter S. So going back to our problem, what we actually need is that our domains remain uniformly John. If we have that property, so if we work within a class of domains that are contained in a bigger box, that are all John with respect to a given point, and have the same John constant, then we have a uniform Korn inequality. Now, this is the first, one of the first results that we needed for our argument, and I want to show you very, very briefly how you could prove such a result. If you've ever worked with dimension reduction, linearized elasticity, and so on and so forth, you are familiar with Korn inequalities, and the way in which all of us would prove it would be the following. You argue by contradiction. Imagine that you have a set, so a sequence of sets in our class, a sequence of associated displacements, such that, well, the L2 norm of the gradients is 1, the L2 norm of the linearized strain is small, let's say it goes like 1 over n. The set converges to a limiting omega, so I could kind of think of replacing those conditions by these ones. Then my sequence is bounded in H1, it converges weakly. The limiting strain is 0, I have the docking condition, so this tells me the limiting displacement is 0. And then I can use the first Korn inequality and get to a contradiction. There's just a tiny problem there. The argument is wrong. And why is it so? Well, because I cheated a little bit before. The kind of compactness you have for your sets is in the Hausdorff sets. The kind of convergence you would need to say the L2 norms are close and such is in the measure sense. These two things are not comparable. There are very easy counterexamples. Take a set with full measure, take a then subset, cut it up to the point n. What you get is a set of zero measure, but it still converges in the Hausdorff sense. What is the bottom line and the take-home message? It still works, but you need to put there quite a bit of extra work and some delicate geometric measure argument to make it work. Going back to our problem then, we have our uniform Korn inequality, but in our case, we have some sets that are evolving with time, and we need them to be drawn with respect to the same point and with the constant C independent of time. So how can we guarantee that? And in order to tell you something about this, I need now to be more specific about which kind of accretion we're having in our mind. So we are thinking to a model for normal growth, meaning that the body grows in a normal direction through a certain growth rate R, which could depend on the position, let's say, the back strain, time, and whatsoever. So how do you describe accretion? Well, you know that the point x of t is added to your configuration at time theta x of t equal to t. Then you differentiate this equation and you get this one here. You plug in the growth law and you end up having this kind of equation here. In other words, you end up having an eikonal problem where here you have this function r of x. And r of x of the modulus of the gradient of theta of x has to be equal to 1. What is an important point for us is that in practice, this r will be dependent on the back strain. So it will have at most Lipschitz regularity. It will certainly not be C11. And why is that important? Because then you start looking into the literature and you start trying to understand what is known about this eikonal equation, and you realize that the results that were already there were requiring either R to be constant or to be C11. And they were saying, okay, if you start from an initial datum nice enough, let's say which satisfies the interior ball regularity, then it would keep the interior ball regularity, albeit with a slightly worse radius. In our setting, we are not C11, so we cannot use those results there. The only thing that we can use is that we know our growth rate is bounded from below and from above, so there exists a unique viscosity solution. But that's it. What is the nice news instead? Well, we don't really need the uniform internal ball condition. We just need our sets to be drawn. And in fact, we can reformulate our question in the following way. So we can ask ourselves, if I start from an initial set which is drawn, is it true that if I take a viscosity solution of my eikonal problem with a growth rate which is Lipschitz, then this set remains uniformly drawn? And the answer is yes. And this is something that we proved together with Elisa, that not only the set remains uniformly drawn, but this regularity is sharp. What does it mean that it's sharp? Well, it means that you can provide counterexamples showing that you cannot do really better than John. Even if you start from a nice datum, it doesn't stay with the internal ball property. The set doesn't stay with the internal cone property. And actually, we even proved it in a slightly general setting, namely for Hamiltonians, which are not even continuous, but satisfy a convexity and non-degeneracy assumption with respect to the gradient. But let's stick with the eikonal problem for us. Now let me just tell you one word about the proof. So how does the proof work? Well, the key remark is that actually you have an explicit representation of this solution theta of x via kind of a geodesic reformulation. And so at the end of the day, you end up working with curves that start from your point and trying to show that these curves have a nice enough slanted cone that fits within your original domain. So going back to our free boundary problem, so now we can solve the equilibrium problem given the growth. The question is if we can solve also the full free boundary problem when the growth is not prescribed. And this was the result that we proved with Caterina, Ulisse, and Giuseppe. So we showed that if you take a small enough time t, then you can find a solution u theta. Why do you need a small enough t? Well, because you can assume, you can imagine that if you take a t too big, at some point, the geometry of your set will be, that you will not be able to prove anymore that your geometry is preserved and that the solution exists. What I just want to say very briefly about the proof is that this goes through by means of a Schauder's fixed point argument in terms of alpha. So you start assuming that you have a prescribed backstrain with Lipschitz norm small enough. And based on this given pre-strained backstrain, you solve the eikonal problem. Okay, this gives you theta. And then it gives you also the sets omega t. Once you have your sets omega t, you solve the elastic equilibrium there, and you compute the new alpha. And then you have to show that the map going from alpha tilde to alpha satisfies all the assumptions of Schauder's fixed point. And I think I'm still on time. And so I can give you a couple of references if you're interested in what we did. And I thank you very much for your attention.